Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman. And this is Global Insight. This week, New Zealand has signed up to a new 15-country Asia-Pacific trade agreement. But India, who New Zealand would love to do a trade deal with, has walked away from the table. Welcome, Robert.
Morning, Bruce.
Let's start with the conference where this agreement was signed. New Zealand went to the East Asia Summit with some expectations. Were they realised?
I think yes and no. I think New Zealand was quite pleased by the fact that the East Asia Summit helped New Zealand consolidate what is an improving relationship with China. It was in the course of the summit that New Zealand announced an upgrade of the free trade agreement with China, and that's important to this country. It should be recalled that we were the first developed country to sign a free trade agreement with China. And there was some concerns in Wellington earlier in the year that the differences over the highway issue could lead to a slowdown in negotiations to upgrade the agreement. Well, that's now been completed, so that problem's out of the way. But that, of course, is not down exclusively to the East Asia Summit. I think New Zealand went into this summit hoping there could be some momentum with the regional comprehensive economic partnership arrangement. Negotiations have been going on a long time, and I think New Zealand was very pleased that it was signed. But as you indicated in introductory comments, some considerable disappointment that India decided at the last minute not to sign it. Now they could yet join it. The agreement will come up for formal signing beginning of next year. So it's not all over yet, but the signs are not particularly promising regarding India. But it's a big agreement. It's more than 2 billion people are encompassed by the agreement, close to a third of the world's population, and it includes the 10 ASEAN countries, and also most of the dialogue partners, with the exception of the United States, are involved in this agreement.
New Zealand already has trade agreements with a number of the countries that are in this new partnership. So does this really add anything new?
I think it does, and I think most economists believe that it could add considerable momentum because, countries like we're involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, so we already have quite good and improving trade relations which increasingly see a reduction of tariff barriers with a number of countries concerned. But it does expand the net a bit. But the big disappointment is, from a New Zealand point of view, and I suspect for many other players involved in this trade agreement, that India has pulled out. India is a huge country. It's got more than 1 billion population. It's already an important economic partner for New Zealand. In 2016, it was about the 10th biggest trade partner of New Zealand, and we're seeing quite a bit of headway, not only in terms of traditional New Zealand agricultural exports, but in terms of trade in services and also in education. Again, in 2016, you saw more than 10,000 Indian students studying in this country. More than 35,000 Indian tourists visited in New Zealand in that year. So, and it's got, the momentum has gathered since then. So I think there is some disappointment that India hasn't joined this multilateral agreement. And of course it does have implications for another area where New Zealand's been working with India, which is the bilateral free trade agreement. I think the fallback position for New Zealand was, New Zealand's been trying to negotiate a free trade agreement since 2010 on a bilateral basis with India, and it's had all sorts of problems. And I think from New Zealand negotiators' point of view, trade negotiators' point of view, well, maybe if we could get India into this multilateral agreement, that could deliver some of the benefits that have been denied us through the lack of progress in the free trade agreement bilaterally. So that it's a bit of a knockback. I suppose from New Zealand's point of view, the time now will be to intensify on the bilateral front, given the fact that India has declined to join this big agreement. The comprehensive regional agreement.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that he was following Gandhi's example of self-reliance in deciding not to join the deal. Is that the real reason for his decision?
Mr. Modi is a populist, and therefore he's described it in terms which he believes will be good for him politically. I think he's fearful, and Indian officials readily admit this, that under the regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement, as currently framed, they are fearful that India signing it could result in a rapid influx of relatively cheap Chinese imports. But there's another side to this, and that is, while India has opposed this agreement because it fears for the consequences for some of its own industries, some Indian exporters are equally fearful that by staying out and denying access to this huge market for Indian exporters, it could also have negative impacts for the economy, particularly at a time when the Indian economy is beginning to slow down. It should be recalled that since 1991, India has been one of the fastest growing economies in the world, growing between 6 and 8% a year. There's signs now that's beginning to slow down, and some Indian economists believed the regional comprehensive economic partnership would have been just the shot in the arm the Indian economy needs at a time when it's slowing momentum. But Mr. Modi has looked at it through a political as well as an economic lens, and I do think that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump interpret the world in terms of powerful states playing the decisive role, and therefore by definition they may see such multilateral arrangements as not as quite as important as safeguarding their economic sovereignty.
Why does New Zealand keep hoping for a free trade deal with India?
Well, I think we sort of made some inroads into answering that. I mean, India has become an important partner. Economically, the opportunities are terrific. If India was predisposed to drop some of the tariffs it has against some of our dairy exports, it could be an absolute boon for the New Zealand economy. New Zealand's very good at what it does in global terms in agricultural products. There'll be considerable demand in the country of more than 1 billion people. We've both witnessed, Bruce, how the free trade agreement with China has been a tremendous boost to New Zealand exporters in this country, well, and China's huge population. So there's economic reasons, and I think also going back to what we're talking about, education and service links look very promising as well. There's also, and we shouldn't forget this, there's 100,000 people in New Zealand who have Indian ancestry. This is quite a large population. So there's quite important country-to-country links and people-to-people links. But I think finally there's a political reason as well as economic. India is a liberal democracy like New Zealand. And I think New Zealand trade negotiators looking to the future would probably argue that if you can get the sort of free trade agreement that we signed with China, where there's a really serious reduction in tariffs over a period of time, that sort of agreement may be more enduring than say with China, because China is an authoritarian state. We've already seen the ebbs and flows of that relationship because of the Huawei controversy, where there was a suspicion that the company was not independent of an authoritarian government in Beijing. I think that relations between two liberal democracies might be much easier to navigate in the long term. And I think there's disappointment that India, as a liberal democracy, has stayed out of this very important regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Pēr Malinge.